The world froze for a moment when the royal household unveiled the latest official civil portraits of their Majesties the King and Queen. The air was thick with anticipation, and within seconds, the images began to circulate like wildfire, each pixel carefully dissected by royal watchers, media outlets, and millions of citizens across the globe. But these weren't just any portraits. No, these were messages. Carefully curated, meticulously styled, and steeped in symbolism that echoed through the marble corridors of power, loyalty, and legacy. The first gaze meets the king. Regal yet burdened. A man who has weathered the tempests of duty and the endless scrutiny of a crown inherited not merely from lineage but from history itself. The photograph captures him not merely as a figurehead, but as a man with deep eyes that betray a quiet storm, an unspoken pain and a promise to remain steadfast. The king's posture, upright and poised, speaks to the dignity of a monarch fully aware of the weight he carries. His expression is calm, yet one cannot help but sense the layers beneath: grief, responsibility, and a relentless commitment to country and tradition. Then there's the Queen, a vision of grace and command. Dressed with the elegance of someone who understands the power of symbolism, her clothing, a subtle blend of national heritage and contemporary finesse, does more than flatter her figure. It speaks of a modern monarchy, one that evolves yet respects the past. The Queen's portrait is not soft or secondary. It's assertive. It tells of a woman not just supporting her husband but walking beside him as an equal. The light falls on her face in such a way that one can almost feel the warmth of her personality, yet there is an unmistakable steel behind her eyes. What makes these portraits so captivating is not just their aesthetic brilliance, but the moment in which they arrive. The monarchy, under more scrutiny than ever before, is facing a cultural and generational shift. These images are not simply about two individuals. They are declarations. Declarations of stability amidst chaos, of dignity in the face of criticism, of continuity in an age of uncertainty. The backgrounds of these portraits are as telling as the subjects themselves. Gone are the overly ornate backdrops of previous eras, replaced instead with understated settings that echo solemnity and power. Whether standing before a stately, dark velvet curtain or a neutral-toned wall steeped in historical resonance, the message is clear: we are in a new age, but we have not forgotten our roots. And the public has noticed. Social media erupted with a mixture of awe, intrigue, and intense speculation. What does the Queen's brooch mean? Was it worn by a former monarch? What's the significance of the king's lapel pin? Does it mark a military honor or an intimate tribute? These questions flooded timelines, television panels, and newspaper columns across the world. Fashion analysts praised the Queen's restrained yet powerful styling. Political commentators noted the king's subtle yet resolute stance. Body language experts dissected every muscle, every tilt of the head, every flicker of emotion that might suggest something deeper. And royal enthusiasts, they celebrated. For them, this was a long-awaited window into the private hearts of very public figures. But behind the elegance, the symbolism, and the admiration, there is a more haunting truth. These portraits also serve as shields, carefully crafted images meant to restore a faltering public trust. In recent months, the monarchy has faced relentless storms, controversies, betrayals, a generational divide that no royal decree can fix overnight. These photos, while beautiful, are strategic. They are attempts to reclaim a narrative, slipping into the hands of tabloids and TikTok critics, to portray strength, unity, and relevance in an era increasingly disillusioned with hereditary privilege. And yet, even within this strategic display, there is sincerity. The kind of authenticity that only leaks through when the camera captures a fraction too long. In the king's slightly drawn expression lies the memory of loved ones lost, of years spent waiting for a throne that came with heartbreak. In the Queen's eyes, a fierce protectiveness, of her family, her dignity, her role in a world that questions her very existence. There's another layer too, an unspoken commentary on succession. The portraits speak of legacy, yes, but also of preparation. Of handing the torch, or perhaps holding it tightly for just a little longer. With the younger generation watching from the wings and public interest shifting toward new faces, this moment was their reaffirmation: the king and queen are not relics. They are the axis around which the monarchy still spins. And perhaps, therein lies the true genius of these portraits. They are not just art. They are arguments, for relevance, for reverence, for royalty. The king and queen, through these frames, are saying, we are still here. We still matter. And we still have something to offer. Critics, of course, will argue otherwise. They'll point to lavish spending, outdated traditions, and the increasing discomfort around inherited power. They will dissect these images as propaganda, as distractions from deeper institutional flaws. And maybe, in part, they're right. But art has always been political. Portraits, throughout history, have always been more than mere representations, they're manifestos. And these are no different. Still, for many, the reaction has been overwhelmingly emotional. Older generations recall past portraits and marvel at the continuity. Young admirers, often cynical, found themselves unexpectedly moved. Something about the depth in the king's expression, the quiet strength of the queen, sparked conversations at dinner tables and debates online. There is a gravity to these images, a sense that, in a world tilting toward the unpredictable, this is one thing that has remained intact. The release of these civil portraits is not merely a ceremonial event. It is a cultural moment. A moment designed to bind history and future, to connect tradition with modernity. And whether one supports or questions the monarchy, the brilliance of this moment lies in its capacity to stir. To make people feel, to make them pause, to ask questions. Who are we as a people? What do we expect from our leaders? What does dignity look like in 2025? These portraits don't offer answers, but they invite reflection. And that, perhaps, is their greatest triumph. Because beyond the clothes, the posture, the lighting, and the symbolism lies something undeniably human. A man and a woman standing not just for themselves, but for something larger. For a nation, for a legacy, for an idea that, despite scandal, change, and controversy, still refuses to vanish into history. And yet, for all the admiration these portraits inspire, they now serve as more than just royal documentation. They are catalysts of conversation, cultural mirrors that reflect the deeper evolution of a monarchy struggling to retain its relevance in the 21st century. In the silence of their stillness, these images have ignited voices across the world, both supportive and skeptical, as people unpack every nuanced detail to understand what the king and queen are really saying without uttering a word. This is where the story becomes even more compelling, because now, we must step beyond the visual and venture into the meaning behind the monarchy's decision to release these images now, at this particular moment in time. Behind the scenes, palace insiders have whispered of long and deliberate planning leading up to this release. Every decision, from the tilt of the crown to the placement of hands, from the historical references sewn into the queen's gown to the subtle nods to heritage in the king's attire, was approved at the highest level. No choice was accidental. The release, strategically timed following months of global turbulence and domestic uncertainty, appears designed to anchor the monarchy once again in the public's emotional consciousness. At a time when monarchies across Europe are shrinking, modernizing, or even fading, this gesture is a bold reassertion of symbolic power. But the question remains, can symbolism alone withstand the trials of reality? In many ways, the release of these portraits reveals the tightrope the king and queen must walk. They are not merely monarchs. They are guardians of a tradition that is increasingly scrutinized by a public demanding transparency, accountability, and modernity. These images are not just a statement of presence, they are a plea for continuity. But the world today is not the world of yesterday. The public no longer looks at crowns with blind reverence. They ask questions now, hard questions, about money, about power, about privilege. And while these portraits dazzle with grace, they cannot answer those questions directly. So instead, they whisper. They suggest. They lean into narrative. They remind us, subtly but firmly, that the crown is more than gold and jewels. It is a story, a living, breathing myth made flesh through individuals who carry the weight of centuries. And in these portraits, that myth attempts to renew itself. But let us consider the emotional undercurrent as well. For the king and queen, this moment is deeply personal. The king, having lived much of his adult life in the long shadow of a sovereign parent, now stands alone at the apex of duty. His eyes, tired yet alert, reveal that monarchy is not merely an inheritance, it is a burden. He has been prepared for this role since childhood, yet the cost of that preparation is etched across his face. There is resolve, certainly, but also the quiet ache of a man who knows too well the cost of duty. The queen, ever the steady anchor, radiates a different kind of strength. In the background of her calm confidence lies a woman who has endured public speculation, criticism, and transformation in the eyes of the nation. Her current presence is no accident, it is the result of years of careful cultivation, grace under fire, and an unflinching understanding of what it means to be both wife and queen. In these portraits, she does not fade into the background. She commands, not loudly, but with the serene confidence of someone who knows exactly who she is and why she matters. And then there is the generational implication, the inevitable reality of succession. These portraits, while focused on the current king and queen, serve as a silent handover plan. The younger royals, waiting in the wings, navigating their own identities, occasionally embroiled in scandal or celebrated in youth-driven media, watch these portraits not just as family, but as inheritors. Whether they embrace tradition or attempt to reshape it, they are being summoned into a legacy they did not ask for, yet cannot avoid. These images say to them, "This is what the crown requires. Are you ready?" But there is another layer to this story that the public cannot ignore, the political dimension. The monarchy is not a political institution in the conventional sense, but it is deeply political in its survival. Every public image, every gesture, every appearance must be calculated with surgical precision. These portraits, then, are part of a broader diplomatic language, a message to foreign allies that stability reigns, a message to domestic audiences that the crown remains in steady hands, and a message to the press that amidst the storms of scandal and speculation, the sovereign institution endures. Yet with every message comes a risk of misinterpretation. In some corners of the internet, theories abound. Some claim the Queen's brooch belonged to a controversial historical figure, suggesting the monarchy is tone-deaf. Others argue the king's stiff posture is not confidence but discomfort, perhaps a reaction to growing pressure or internal tensions. It's a reminder that no portrait, no matter how carefully composed, can ever fully control the narrative once it is in the hands of the public. And that public, now more diverse, more engaged, and more vocal than ever, will ultimately decide the legacy of these images. For some, they are already iconic, a refreshing affirmation of unity and dignity. For others, they are relics of an institution struggling to justify its place in a world demanding equity and progress. The conversation is no longer about whether these portraits are beautiful, they clearly are. The real question is, are they believable? And therein lies the power and the peril. Because while these portraits can inspire, they cannot act. They cannot legislate, they cannot reform, they cannot modernize. Only the people behind them can. The king and queen have sent a signal, a quiet yet powerful one. But what they do next will matter far more than how they look. Still, for now, the images hang proudly. In state buildings, across media outlets, on the digital screens of royalists and skeptics alike. They represent a pause in the chaos, a moment of regal calm, a snapshot in time that says, "We are still here." But even as admirers praise the light, the poise, the symbolism, the broader world continues to evolve. Economic crises, cultural upheavals, geopolitical tensions, all press inward on the soft walls of tradition. And the monarchy must do more than pose. It must prove that it is not merely a figurehead institution, but a living embodiment of national unity. Prove that it can adapt. Prove that it deserves to exist not just because it always has, but because it still has something meaningful to offer. As the days turn into weeks and the initial excitement of the portraits fades into the rhythm of daily life, their true test will begin. Will they be remembered, revered, or forgotten amidst the noise of a world that rarely looks back? That question, like the monarchy itself, remains unresolved. But one thing is certain: these portraits, in all their quiet splendor, have reopened a conversation long overdue. A conversation about duty, about dignity, about the strange, beautiful burden of royalty in a modern world that both loves and resents it. And so we return to the images, still, silent, watchful. Waiting for history to decide what they meant. Waiting for a future that will either reaffirm or dismantle the story they so carefully try to tell. But perhaps that is the nature of monarchy itself. It does not roar, it whispers, and in those whispers lie centuries of longing, of identity, of hope. These portraits are not the end of a story. They are its continuation, a visual heartbeat of a nation asking itself the most urgent of questions. In the face of all we know, all we question, and all we fear, Do we still believe in the crown? If this story moved you, if you saw something in these portraits that stirred your heart or challenged your thoughts, then join the conversation. Like this video, share it with someone who still believes, or someone who never did. Comment below with your thoughts. And most importantly, subscribe for more revealing royal stories, unfiltered truths, and exclusive insights into the lives behind the crowns.